Hello, hello. Welcome to One Wild World, a podcast by The Echo. I'm your host, Matthew Juneau.
And I'm the editor, Mike Davis.
So, one thing I appreciate that past generations haven't had is just how connected and informed we can be about so much of the world through the internet.
I completely agree. With the internet, you can truly curate your information experience more than was ever possible before.
Yeah, and you can find like-minded groups of people for pretty much any interest. A great example of this is on Instagram. There seems to be no shortage of accounts posting wildlife photography or videography along with fun facts. This is actually one of the great ways I constantly learn new things about all different types of animals and the people that work with them. This is an example of what's most important to our mission at the Echo.
No doubt, education is the paramount concern here. Also, it seems like a lot of these accounts are usually pretty good about responding to comments and questions, which shows their passion and dedication.
Plus, I love when a social media channel has an appealing persona to it. For example, I feel like over the last few years, I've really seen some of the larger organizations like national parks or the U.S. Fish Wildlife Service embrace posting memes.
Yes, it's always a joy to see attempts at achieving meme lord status with organizations like that. While the memes might not all be winners, it is really good to see that they are trying out different ways to educate people and to stay relevant in order to help people recognize the value in wild animals and places.
As a matter of fact, today's guest is part of an organization that I've followed on Instagram for a few years now. When we were planning this first season of One Wild World, I reached out to the organization and they agreed to join us for a conversation. I was ecstatic for this opportunity due to the fact it would be our first conversation on an international scale with a group that operates in a wildly different part of the world. But before we transition into that conversation, I've prepared another round of
What's That Animal?
For this episode, I wanted to find an animal that I've been aware of for a long time, but I haven't really known much about. So, when I found this soundbite of the animal, I knew it had to be the one featured for today's episode. Here's that sound. This animal appears in pop culture from time to time, but usually its depiction is not very accurate. So I'm glad that with this podcast, we can properly represent the animal. One more time, here's the sound. Make sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out what animal this is. Now, all the guests that we've had on the show do incredible work for animals, and that passion for animals is throughout their whole lives. Today's guest is no exception to that. Rory Francis has done a lot of work with animals. He is trained to work as a safari guide in South Africa's Kruger National Park. He has also monitored and managed endangered species in Zululand, South Africa. He currently works as a ranger with Aussie Ark, an animal conservation project in New South Wales, Australia. Let's check out the conversation now. It's exciting to have this be the first international podcast that we're doing. And I've been a big fan on social media of Aussie Ark for a while. And when we were starting the podcast, I was like, I'm going to reach out, see if we can land someone from there. So it's definitely exciting to have you on today. Can you tell us a little bit more about Aussie Ark and the goals of the organization?
Yeah, so Aussie Ark, it's not a rocket science model. It's come from practical solutions to the massive environmental problems that we face. So in Australia, we've got the highest mammal extinction rate out of anywhere in the world. And not just that, of the top 5 in the last 30 years, second, third, fourth, and fifth added together aren't as bad as us. We're facing these huge issues from a few factors. Habitat destruction, there's just not enough places and niches for all our animals to live, and feral animals. So cats and foxes were introduced from North America and Europe, and when they were brought over, they've just come in as these apex predators, and they've just decimated so many of the species that we have here. So what we want to do is, we all started off with the Tasmanian devils. Originally we were called devil-ark, and that was all in response to this devil facial tumor disease. So this devil facial tumor disease is like a horrible, horrible disease where it's actually contact transmissible, so they spread it by touch. Tasmanian devils are a nomadic species, so they're strictly scavengers. They'll come and feed together and might be a dead roo or something, and they'll be eating 10 at once on this one dead roo, going nuts. They can put down 40% of their body weight in under a minute, so they really hoof it down. And then they can spread up to 10 kilometres in one night. So they're solitary nomadic species. So they'll come, feed together every 3 or 4 days, and then they'll separate. And so you can just imagine that ripping through the whole of Tasmania and just decimating their whole population. So what we did is we said, you know what, we can actually do something about this. We can jump on board and fight the good fight for these guys. And our parent organisation is the Australian Reptile Park. So they started breeding Tassie devils down there. They worked really, really hard. They were breeding them out the back of the zoo, about 30 different enclosures that they had. Tasmanian devils are incredibly hard to breed in that kind of situation. They pretty much need silence. So they're tiptoeing around these zookeepers, trying to be as quiet as possible, literally doing like sign language. And then some kid would scream or some loudspeaker would go off, and the whole thing was just a bit counterintuitive. So what we did is we set up our Aussie Ark base up in Barrington Tops, and we just went with the program. You're not going to outsmart 100,000 years of evolution. So what we've done is we've taken it back. We've given them massive areas to breed. They've got really strong genetics in there. We actually manage it as a whole Australia-wide campaign. So there's a person who's literally in charge of all the Tasmanian devils everywhere in Australia. And so we'll send biopsies of their skin to Sydney Uni. They'll code the genetics, then they'll make recommendations of who goes with who. And that's really to try to build up that genetically diverse, robust insurance population ready for wild reintroduction. That was 10 years ago we started as Aussie Ark, and we've progressed quite a long way since then. And we've diversified and we've become Aussie Ark from Devil Ark. And in that process, we've been able to bring on all these new species. We now breed southern brown bandicoots, long-nosed potoroos, rufous bedongs, palmer wallabies, brush-tail rock wallabies. We've got eastern quolls. We're doing spotted tail quolls, and we've got a whole range of species that we're keen to bring on. And what we'll do is we'll bring them in, we'll breed them in semi-wild situations in that the devil enclosures can be 6-7 hectares big, which is still a massive area. And then what we'll do is we'll reintroduce them into wild. So we've bred all these really critically endangered species right on the edge of extinction, and then we'll put them out into our reserves. So currently we've got a 400-hectare reserve called the Barrington Wildlife Sanctuary. This is a massive, massive area that is feral free. So we get rid of all the cats, the foxes, the pigs, and everything that's going to degrade that ecosystem and wipe out our uniquely beautiful species. And we make sure that's protected. It's big, tall fences that nothing can get in. It's got an electric wire buried under the ground, all in an effort to keep our species safe and make sure that they're not getting affected by these massive issues. And that's kind of the model. We go in, we see what's critically endangered, what's right on the edge. We breed them up and we put them back. We started up here in Barrington. We've got this site, which I'm at right now. And then from there, we've been able to, once it's no longer an idea, it's got momentum and we can push forward. And so we've been able to buy a few more properties. So we've got a Curricabark property, which is one that's just north of the Barrington Tops National Park, a really beautiful area that I'm in now. And then we've got a few other reserves right next to us here. And our next big project, which I'm kind of the reserve manager up there, is Mungo Valley, hour and a half inland of Byron Bay. And that's 1,000 hectares up there. Really, really beautiful habitat. It's got rainforest. It's got these beautiful ridge lines, great habitat for our koalas. And we're going to go in there and do all these different management strategies, really get that as a whole ecosystem function, and not just having a few focus species, but in protecting all the plants and making sure that it is all functioning together because it's so interdependent.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing that keeps coming up the more that we have these conversations, that it's one thing to specifically protect one type of species, but to be able to protect whole areas or landscapes and keep those as sanctuaries or just as pristine of ecosystems as you can. There's so many complex interactions we as humans don't understand. So it's great to be able to protect those things. For people that may not be as familiar with them, can you describe a Tasmanian devil? I think a lot of what people know is from the old Looney Tunes. So you can describe what they look like?
A Tasmanian devil is a little ball of muscle. If you were going to pick a dog species, they'd be a little bit maybe like a pit bull or something. They're rough and tumble, but they're fully black. Some of them have these beautiful white flarings across their breast or on their rump. Everyone's kind of unique in that way. And they've got these amazing set of jaws. Their head is nearly a third of the size of their body, and of that head, about a quarter of it might be brain. So they're not maybe the most intelligent species, but what they can do is they fill that niche. And so they're strictly scavengers. They'll go around, they'll clean up the bush, get rid of infection and everything like that. They've got these really strong jaw muscles. Pound for pound, strongest mammal jaw out of anywhere in the world. So if you scaled that up to something like a lion, it's almost 50% stronger. So they crunch through bone. They'll eat the whole thing. The only thing they won't break down is the fur. That'll come out in their scalp. But everything else, they'll break it down. So that's playing a really crucial role in this ecosystem. If something falls down, you need those scavengers going in and cleaning up the shop. And they start out really cute as joeys, and that's something that we get to have a lot of experience with. Being a marsupial, they do all their gestation that we would do inside the womb, they'll do externally in a pouch. So mum will go, she'll get pregnant about a month later. She's got a backwards facing pouch. She'll actually have 20 jelly bean sized joeys. They've got 4 teats. So potentially 4 will be successful. She'll eat the rest, as grim as it is, but that's just nothing goes to waste in the bush. And then from that, she'll raise them up at about 5-6 months. That's when she'll den them. So she'll choose a nice den site where she wants to raise her litter of joeys, and then they'll be dependent on her until about 9 months. And that's something that they're extremely good parents in, that she'll ferociously protect that den site from any intruders, be that a male that might be 150% times the size. They can be a good 2 or 3 kilos bigger than the females. She'll sit out the front of that den and she'll protect it with all she's got. And so they do make really, really good parents. They're a really beautiful, unique animal. Just because you can't go up and pat them and cuddle them potentially because you might lose a finger, it's not something that you have to write them on just because they're not cute and cuddly. And that's part of the reason why they ended up getting in the strife in the first place, is because when people went down and the Europeans settled in Tasmania as farming progressed and took over the island, what happened there was they started to hunt the devils, because they would see 20 devils on a cow carcass. The males can be 8 or 9 kilos. They're not going to take down a 300-400 kilo cow. It's just not happening. So what they were doing is they were probably benefiting the farmers. And I grew up on a farm. I know how it is. And what they were doing is that they came in, they're cleaning up the bush there, but these guys saw these animals feeding on death, making these growls and screams and everything that they do, and they're so iconic for. And they went in and they hunted them. So they reduced the numbers so low that they actually started to inbreed. And from that inbreeding, they can trace it back to one individual female. She randomly mutated in her genetics, and that spurred on this entire problem. That one random mutation, because of their social morphology in the way that they behave and coming and feeding and separating and everything like that, it just spread through and decimated the population. They're less than 5% of what they originally were. They've hung on a little bit longer in the wild. They were already predicted to go extinct. And that's why we jumped on board and we started working so hard so quickly to breed them up so we could reintroduce them before they went extinct. And because of that, they've actually changed. Usually they would start to breed at about 2 years old. And that's when they're fully ready to go. And that's also the same time that this devil facial tumor disease takes hold. So before 2 years old, they're okay in the wild. So they've hung on because we've got all these really young juveniles. But what's happened is they've actually started to breed at 18 months or 12 months. So they're getting these really short, quick lives. You might be able to produce 1 litter of joeys before they get affected by this horrible disease. What we've done is we've set up these beautiful sanctuaries and we've reintroduced Tasmanian devils. They were originally on Australian mainland. So this past breeding season, we had the first wild-bred Tasmanian devils on Australian mainland in over 900 years. That's a really huge effect, and that's something we're really proud of.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really good to be able to bring them back from so close to extinction. And I like the fact earlier you said in collaboration with Sydney University, basically playing matchmaker with the genetics to say, oh, okay, we can get a little bit more diversity if this devil mates with this devil. And so it sounds like you're really being intentional and smart with the way that you're bringing them back. And I know that Australians' most popular mammals are usually koalas, kangaroos, and dingoes. What would you share about animals like quolls or long-nosed potaroos to help them be included in that popularity?
The thing about it is that people know the koalas because they're so iconic. People know the dingoes because there's a lot of them. People know the kangaroos because there's a lot of them. The big reason people don't know our apex predator, as far as mammals go, in Australia is a spotted-tailed quoll. So these guys are in the same family as devils. They have the same kind of breeding cycles. They've got the same sort of setup, except they're the apex predator. And the reason people don't know about them is because of the issues of the cats, the foxes, the habitat destruction. These guys, like our little long-nosed potaroos or southern brown bandicoots or any of these species, they should be commonplace. People should know about them, but because they are in such low numbers, they don't get the spotlight. I'd say almost 90% of Australians might not even know what a long-nosed potaroo is, so let alone the rest of the world. And it's because these guys have just smashed by cats and foxes. It's simple as that. I'll say it 100 times, but a cat and a fox can go out. A single cat can kill 8 to 10 animals in one night. And we've got most likely millions of cats in Australia. So they're out there. It's their predatory instinct. Where they evolved, the evolutionary pressures were to be the apex predator, be as sly as you could, be cunning, sneak up, chase the rabbits or these really quick, high twitch animals. Whereas when they come to Australia, our evolutionary pressures are different. We've got all those sort of same factors, but on top of that, Australia is so diverse. We've got these massive deserts, we've got tropical rainforests, we've got highland wetlands and alpine wetlands, and it's so diverse and everything's in its own little niche. So to talk about something that people are a bit more familiar with, like koalas, for example, they eat strictly eucalyptus. They barely have to drink water. They sleep 20 hours a day. So that seems like a really good model for an area that's got a whole lot of eucalyptus. And Australia's got thousands of species of eucalyptus. In one area, they might have 300 or 400 species of that. A koala can eat 30 or 40 different species of those trees, and they'll probably prefer 3 or 4. So that's a really good model for a koala. But as soon as there's a big bushfire, or those trees get cleared, the koala's got no hope. That's its one lifeline. And there's so many endemic species. An endemic species is the species that's found only in that place. And they're in these beautiful little niches. Like one of our newest species that we're bringing on board, the little guy, the broad-toothed rat, an amazing little marsupial that lives in these alpine wetlands of the Barrington Tops National Park. And there's 14 different wetlands up there. Of that, there's probably 3 or 4 that are suitable for them now because of cats, foxes, the effect of feral horses as well. They come in, they ruin the little runways for these broad-toothed rats, and they decimate that sort of habitat. So when a species is that endemic and that close to extinction, and might only be in 3 or 4 different wetlands in the Barrington Tops, that's a species that really needs us to step in and do something about it. And we can't let that slide because there's tipping points with these guys. There might be 300 or 400 individuals out there, but the tipping point might be 250 in that it all becomes inbred and it's no longer a sustainable population of wild individuals. So what we want to do is we want to find those species. And it's not just the big glory ones of the koalas or the Tasmanian devils. We want to look after the quolls and the potoroos and the bettongs and the little broadtooth rat and everything else. And that's something we do pride ourselves on, fighting for the little guy. And in having that whole ecosystem focus, it embodies that, in that you're not just picking one species and making sure it's got food. We'll plant different tea trees or carrics or reeds or sphagnum moss, which these guys run around in, and we'll plant that all out. We'll protect that. So we're protecting not only the broadtooth rat, but an entire ecosystem at the same time. It's proper stuff, and we love it, and we're wildly passionate about this stuff. And to be able to be part of such a cool team that works on these innovative, forward-pushing projects, it's something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, it seems like such a smart design for Devil Arc to have kind of transcended into Aussie Arc, because you're looking after everything that's there, all of the animals, all the way up from some of the more well-known ones to the broadtooth rat, like you were saying. It comes across so well that you're so passionate about all of these animals and the ecosystems. And I know that has to fuel you when you're doing these late night surveys where you're looking for animals. Recently on social media, it was announced that you found a koala in an area that it had never been before. Can you tell us about some of those late night surveys that you're doing and what you're looking for when you do those?
It's one of the best parts of the job. I love going out and spotlighting animals because in Australia, predominantly a lot of the mammals especially, and reptiles, when you're in summer you can go out herping, the study of herpetology, which is all reptiles. They're pretty much nocturnal. So what you want to do is you go out with a spotlight, you shine it in the trees and on the ground, and you're looking for that eye shine, that reflective glare that you get from eyes. You want to see that. And so what we do is we'll go out at night and we'll go spotlighting, and we'll look for all the different animals, be it graded gliders or yellow-bellied gliders or even koalas that we've just found. And it's something we do for fun. Being up here on the top of the mountain, you're away from everything, but we love being out in the wilderness with these animals. So what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll spotlight and we'll do fauna surveys. So we'll record everything that we see, and then we can get sort of better data, and that can inform our management strategies. This year we're seeing a few less gliders. How can we affect that? For example, we will go out and do health checks of our quolls or something like that, and they're looking skinny, and how do we potentially get to affect that? And that's that whole ecosystem function I keep banging on about. We've been out doing a whole bunch of koala surveys. So for the past 4 or 5 nights, we've been starting at 12 a.m. and we'll go out and we'll send out 2 drones. They'll find the heat signature of the koalas, see it on their screen, then we'll bush bash, go in, we'll find those koalas, kind of spot where they all are. And as the sun comes up, we've got professional koala catchers, like ecologist guys, that go in, they can grab that koala, they'll put it in a sack, and then we can treat it for the nasty diseases they have. And the thing that decimates populations of koalas here in Australia is actually chlamydia. So they get chlamydia. It's a horrible disease for them. There's sort of 2 different strains. One, they'll lose condition, and that's how they die. And then the second type of chlamydia actually makes them blind. So what we'll do is we'll bring them down, test them for all these diseases, and if someone does have it, then we can maybe isolate them and try to make them better and improve their quality of life and everything like that. And what else we'll do is we'll take the biopsy. So that's like a little chunk of their ear. It doesn't hurt them too much. And then we'll put a tag so we can ID them later. And we'll use that little bit of skin, again, send it to Sydney Uni. They'll code the genetics of that. And then we can see the diversity within our reserve, because we do put up these feral-proof fences. Keeping all the ferals out, it also keeps our animals in. So as soon as you do that, it's a managed system. Be it that these are massive areas where you can't see the edges, we still need to know the genetics and we still need to manage that. So that can kind of inform our management strategies. Do we need to bring up a few koalas from somewhere else and boost that genetic diversity within the reserve? But in real life, it's just a lot of fun. We've got 20 crew up here at the moment. Everyone's come from different organisations working together in being able to do this massive project, go out and catch all these koalas, and we love it. And it's a fun time being up all night and all day working on these koalas, and not many people get to do that. So really, really thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, sounds like you got a good crew of people if you're willing to spend long nights working together and, like you're saying, bush bashing, staying up, doing all sorts of surveys, and sounds like a good time though. You touched on this a little bit with the Mongo Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, but what are you most excited about in the future for that sanctuary, and why is it so important to protect spaces like that?
Yeah, so it is crucial what we're doing up there. What we've done is we've gone into an area that was heavily farmed and logged in the past 100, 150 years. And so what we're doing right now is we are putting up those fences. We'll get rid of all the ferals, and we're also planting a whole bunch of trees. It's a really exciting project to see an area that's been pretty heavily degraded. You know, there is some really beautiful spots that have never been touched, and that's sort of those old growth forests and everything. But we've got the massive goal of planting 100,000 trees. And so what we've done is we've actually planted 26,000 trees already. 18,000 of those trees, all rainforest trees. So we've got this horrible weed here in Australia. It's called lantana, and basically it's really spiky, horrible habitat. It grows up much taller than me and then just spreads out, and it just literally blankets the whole understory, can kill trees and everything as well, and just dominates. So that takes away all the food species, the good places to hide for our little animals and birds and reptiles and everything else. And so what we do is we went in, we cleared all that lantana, we got rid of it, and then we planted 18,000 trees. So in 5 to 10 years, it'll be a fully biodiverse rainforest. And that's really cool because it means that we've gone in, we've corrected a massive issue there. We've planted this rainforest. And the rest of those 8,000 trees to make up the 26 is all eucalyptus. So we've done massive eucalyptus plantations for our koalas, and that'll be a massive focus up there in Mungo. Koalas this year have just been listed as endangered. If we're in Australia, and koalas are such an iconic species, like our kangaroos and dingoes, if we were to lose those guys, you know, that's a massive blow, and that's something you can never come back from. We had the Tasmanian tiger, and we've lost it. And that's a really hard one lesson, and we don't want to keep learning it. We've got it, and we want to move on, and we want to protect these. So koalas are going to be a massive focus there. We'll have a breeding set up there for koalas as well. We'll have like 10 different koala enclosures where we'll actively breed koalas and reintroduce them into the pristine habitat surrounding them. And then we'll also focus on another really iconic species is our brush-tailed rock wallabies. Beautiful wallabies with white markings on their chins. They've got these long black tails. They're like a tanny brown colour. They look amazing. And they're right on the edge. There was comprehensive surveys done prior to those 2019, 2020 bushfires, which killed millions and millions of animals. It was really devastating for them. So instead of waiting for all the data to come in that these guys are in strife, we jumped on board 2 years ago and we started breeding up brush-tailed rock wallabies. And so we'll breed them up and then we'll reintroduce them into their original habitat. So the koalas, the brush-tailed rock wallabies, the spotted-tailed quolls, the Hastings river mouse, there's a giant barred frog, which is another focus up at our Mungo Valley Reserve. And it's all that as well as everything else, obviously, that gets protected in situ. And having that habitat focus really makes that happen. You protect a species, you plant all these trees, and then you also protect everything else in situ. But yeah, so those are some of the sort of exciting projects.
Are there any misconceptions with Australian wildlife that you want to break down now that you have a little bit of a platform?
I think that people think of Australian wildlife in a manner of it's all desert, it's all out there to kill you. You know, we do have really venomous snakes and they're awesome, and they've evolved that to be able to effectively kill their prey that are a lot bigger than them or might potentially be dangerous to them. And it's a really positive evolutionary pressure, but it might be 15 different species of venomous snakes that are actually going to kill you. We have really unique and beautiful animals. We're on an island, which has meant that through evolution, everything is so unique and diverse and fits into these beautiful little niches. You'll see nothing like an echidna anywhere in the world or any of these different species that are just unique and cool. And just because something might be scary and potentially dangerous, it's not out to get you. There's no red-bellied black snakes slithering up, trying to stalk you or ambush you. What they're doing is they're going about their business. They're eating rodents, they're eating frogs or anything small enough they can get their hands on. If you just leave it and let it stay in its own habitat, it is a dangerous animal, which probably makes it even cooler. But 99% of the bites that you get is someone trying to kill a snake. You're not going to wipe out all the red-bellied black snakes or our big eastern browns or anything like that by killing one snake, you know. So I understand people might be scared, but take that fear and don't turn it into aggression. Maybe turn it into a bit of wonder and an interest in these species, because the more you know about snakes or reptiles or spiders or anything like that, the more interesting they are. Takes away that level of fear that some people might have, and it sparks this curiosity. So if I could kind of convert some potential fear or anger towards some of our species into curiosity and wonder, I think that would be something that would be really awesome to spread.
Yeah, it's really important to be able to understand and respect species, and you can do that without being fearful of them. And so being able to understand that, yeah, that snake has venom, and if it was to bite me, that can be pretty intense, but I know that it's not going to, unless I'm really bothering it to make it feel threatened. It needs that venom to be able to have food for its next meal. So it's one thing to be fearful, but you can still be respectful without being fearful. Lastly, what's the best way that people can support Arc and the work that you do?
So we've got a whole bunch of projects on the go at once. You can head to our website at aussiearc.org.au, and we take donations. We're a non-for-profit that runs purely on the charity of all the people around like us, but might not necessarily be able to get out in the field. If you do want to join us, we'll do a tour. We'll show you around the facility. We have 2 different guest houses that people can come and stay up here at Barrington Tops. When Mungo Valley is developed a little bit more, there'll be 6 different cabins that people can come and stay in the reserve as well and see what we're doing there and be part of the program. We're running a big tree planting program at the moment where it's $5 per tree, and you can get a tree in the ground, which not only is planting a tree and doing something great for that habitat and the animals that rely on that, the carbon and everything else like that. So we're running a few different sort of campaigns at the moment. But if anyone heads to our social media at AussieArc or website at aussiearc.org.au, that's something that you'll find interesting, hopefully, from across the other side of the world or wherever you are, you can protect Australian wildlife.
Yeah, there's not too many ways that you can physically help out from all the way across the world, but for $5 to be able to like plant a tree and help protect that ecosystem that's there. I mean, how many times did we talk about in this conversation alone how important the ecosystem is? So that's foregoing a cup of coffee one day to be able to help protect Australian wildlife. So sounds like a great thing to do. And then I'm an advocate for your social media. That's how I learned about you all. And it's a fascinating social media feed. So definitely give it a follow. Well, Rory, thank you for taking time away from some of the important koala surveys that you're doing, especially running late at night and still finding time to do the podcast today. Thanks so much.
No worries at all. It was an absolute pleasure to be on. And when I left the guys, they were just about to pull a koala about 30 meters out of a tree. So I might get back into it.
All right. Well, good luck with it. I felt so lucky to be able to have this conversation with Rory. It was such a unique experience to coordinate with someone that's on the other side of the world and to learn so much about an ecosystem that is so important, yet so different to the kinds that I've been able to explore in the US. It makes me very happy to know that there are so many people around the world that care deeply for the animals that we share our planet with. Now, at the start of the episode, I played the sound of an animal to help you build your appreciation for animals too, and I wanted to give you the answer to what that animal was. One more time before we reveal the answer, here's the sound. This is the sound of the Tasmanian devil, or should I say multiple Tasmanian devils. This sound comes from a video produced by Arc, where a group of them come out to all feed together. These sounds are exchanged between a few of the devils as they share this meal. After this wonderful conversation with Rory and hearing these real sounds of Tasmanian devils, you hopefully have a bit more of an appreciation for them beyond just knowing about Taz from the Looney Tunes. Tune in next time for another chance to play
What's that animal?
If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe and consider supporting us directly at patreon.com/onewildpodcast. Here, you'll find exclusive content, like the full video versions of our conversations. To find out more about the other work we do, visit our website at onewildpodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram at @theechoanimals, and follow our TikTok at creature.feature. On behalf of all animals, thank you for listening.